He talked back to the Galactic Empress. Now she smiles only for him. The grand throne room of the celestial dominion stretched like a galaxy unto itself, with spiraling columns of iridescent crystal, reaching toward a vaulted ceiling that simulated the cosmos. At its center sat Empress Lyria, her posture perfect, her lavender skin catching the light of 1,000 stars. Her expression remained impassive as it had for the 12 years of her reign, calculating, distant, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Bring forth the human engineer," announced High Chancellor Vexus, his voice echoing across the polished obsidian floor. The assembled courtiers, representatives from 17 star systems, parted silently. None dared meet the Empress's gaze directly. Her violet eyes were said to see through deception, her mind sharper than the ceremonial blade at her hip. Darian Reed walked forward with measured steps. Unlike the ornately dressed nobles, he wore the practical jumpsuit of the engineering corps, adorned only with the insignia of his rank. His dark hair was cropped short, his jawline set with determination rather than fear. "You have questioned my direct order regarding the Tarsian refugee settlement," Empress Lyria stated, her voice melodic yet cold. "Explain yourself." The court collectively held its breath. The last engineer who disagreed with Imperial protocol had been reassigned to the methane mines of Kronos 7. "Your Eminence," Darian began, his voice steady, "the energy grid you've approved is insufficient for the settlement's needs. The calculations were based on outdated population metrics. You presume to know better than Imperial planning?" "I know engineering, Your Eminence, and I know what happens when children freeze during planetary winter because of inadequate power reserves." His eyes, a deep earthy brown, met hers directly. "With respect, I'd rather face your displeasure now than be complicit in preventable suffering later." Gasps rippled through the court. Chancellor Vexus stepped forward, his hand already signaling the guards. But the Empress raised one finger, stopping him instantly. For 3 heartbeats, silence reigned. "Everyone out," she commanded suddenly. "Your Eminence," Vexus protested. "Everyone, out." Each syllable carried the weight of absolute authority. The court evacuated with remarkable speed, leaving Darian standing alone before the throne. He maintained his composure, though his pulse quickened. When the massive doors sealed shut, Empress Lyria leaned forward slightly. "Do you fear me, Engineer Reed?" "I respect your power," he answered carefully, "but I fear making the wrong decision more." Something flickered across her features, too brief to name. "Explain the power requirements as you see them. Speak freely." For the next hour, Darian outlined his concerns, sketching diagrams in the air that the throne room's holographic interface captured and expanded. The Empress listened, occasionally interrupting with incisive questions that revealed her own considerable technical knowledge. "Your analysis is sound," she finally admitted, studying the projected models. "Why didn't you submit these concerns through official channels?" "I did, 3 times. They were rejected." "By whom?" "Minister Calgon. He said the budget was fixed." The Empress's eyes narrowed slightly. "I see." She stood in one fluid motion, descending the 7 steps from her throne. Up close, she was taller than Darian expected, her presence somehow more commanding yet also more real. "I will revise the allocation. The refugees will have adequate power." "Thank you, Your Eminence." She circled him slowly, appraising. "Tell me, Engineer Reed, do many humans share your willingness to risk Imperial displeasure for principle?" "Some do, others learn to stay silent." "And which is better for an empire?" The question seemed to hang in the air between them. Darian considered carefully. "An empire that hears only what it wishes to hear will eventually fall, Your Eminence." For the first time, something almost like curiosity animated her expression. "You will attend me tomorrow. I have questions about other settlement projects. It wasn't a request." "As you command," Darian replied, bowing slightly, as he was escorted from the throne room. He couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had just occurred, though he couldn't possibly have guessed how this encounter would change the course of the celestial dominion forever. Word spread quickly through the Imperial Palace. The human engineer who should have been sanctioned had instead been granted private audience with Empress Lyria, not once but 7 times in the span of 2 weeks. Speculation ran rampant through the corridors of power. "He's being interrogated," insisted Minister Calgon to anyone who would listen. "She's extracting Earth's technical secrets," theorized the Proximan ambassador. None guessed the truth, that for hours each evening, Darian Reed and the Empress discussed everything from infrastructure to philosophy, from Earth's ancient cultures to the nature of effective governance. Tonight, Darian found himself in the imperial study rather than the formal throne room. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held artifacts from 100 worlds, and a massive window revealed the glittering capital stretching to the horizon. "You disagree again," Empress Lyria observed, noting his expression as she explained a taxation policy. "The burden falls disproportionately on developing worlds," Darian said. He had grown more comfortable speaking his mind, though he never forgot to whom he spoke. As it must. They consume imperial protection without contributing technological advancements. Darian shook his head. They can't advance when they're struggling to meet basic needs. It becomes a cycle. The Empress tilted her head, the starlight catching the delicate circlet she wore instead of her formal crown. Her lavender skin seemed to glow softly in the dimmed lighting. "You see everything as interconnected," she said. "Most of my advisors see only their specific domains. On Earth, we'd call that not seeing the forest for the trees." Explain this expression. As Darian described Earth forests, the Empress listened with unexpected interest. He found himself sharing stories of his childhood in the reclaimed wilderness of North America. "Your world sounds chaotic," she observed. "Beautifully so," he agreed. For a moment something wistful crossed her features. "I have never experienced such freedom. From birth I was the Empire's property more than my own person." The vulnerability in her admission startled him. "That sounds lonely." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she didn't immediately look away. "Yes." The chronometer chimed midnight, breaking the moment. "The Orion delegation arrives tomorrow," she said, her formal tone returning. "I require your assessment of their propulsion technology claims. Of course, Your Eminence." As Darian bowed to leave, he noticed Chancellor Vexus watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Engineer Reed," the Empress called as he reached the door. "I find your perspectives valuable." It wasn't quite praise, but from Empress Lyria it was unprecedented. The following morning, Darian was approached by Neva, a young aide with delicate blue markings typical of Centaurians. She cornered him in the engineering complex. "She smiled yesterday," Neva whispered conspiratorially. "Who did?" "The Empress, during the Regulatory Council. When your efficiency report was mentioned, she actually smiled." Darian tried to dismiss the strange flutter in his chest. She probably appreciated the thoroughness. Neva shook her head. "You don't understand. She never smiles. Not since the assassination attempt 3 years ago. The older staff say she hasn't shown emotion since her coronation." Before Darian could respond, an imperial summons flashed on his communicator. Twice in less than 12 hours, unprecedented. As he hurried to the throne room, whispers followed. Court officials stepped aside, some with curious glances, others with thinly veiled resentment. "The human approaches," someone muttered. "The one she keeps calling for." "The one who makes her smile," came the reply. Darian quickened his pace, suddenly eager to discover if there was truth to the rumors, and more troubling, why the thought filled him with such inexplicable warmth. The Cassini Nebula crisis struck without warning. A catastrophic stellar event threatened 3 Imperial outposts and the primary communication relay for the entire Outer Rim. The Imperial Court transformed overnight into a command center, with Empress Lyria personally overseeing evacuation efforts. "The radiation surge will hit in 17 hours, Darian explained, pointing to the projection. "We need to reconfigure the shield generators on all 3 stations simultaneously." Admiral Thorne scoffed. "Impossible. The systems weren't designed for that output." "Then we redesign them," Darian insisted. Remotely. For 3 days he worked alongside the Empress and her top scientists, snatching moments of sleep when possible. On the 4th day, with time nearly exhausted, Darian found Empress Lyria alone in the tactical room studying evacuation numbers. "The death toll projections," she said without looking up. "Even with our efforts, thousands will die." Darian saw something he'd never witnessed before, the slight tremor in her hand as she scrolled through the data. "We can save more," he said firmly. "I have an idea, but it's unorthodox." "Proceed." "The Imperial yacht, it has an experimental quantum shield. If we position it at these coordinates and amplify the resonance pattern, we could extend protection to the primary evacuation route." Her eyes widened. You're suggesting I deploy my personal vessel as a shield? Yes. That would place it, and whoever pilots it, at significant risk. Darian met her gaze steadily. I'm aware. After a moment of silence, she tapped her communicator. Prepare my yacht for immediate departure. Your Eminence, he protested, you can't possibly, who else would you have me send to die, Engineer Reed? Her voice was cool, but something in her eyes had changed. These are my people. Then I'm coming with you, he said without thinking. You'll need an engineer when the shields start to fail. Hours later, as they raced toward the nebula, Darian found himself in the unthinkable position of co-piloting the Imperial yacht. The Empress had dismissed her royal crew, replacing them with volunteers. As the radiation front approached, bathing the viewport in eerie light, Empress Lyria turned to him. If we fail, history will remember this as folly. If we succeed, Darian countered, they might remember you differently than just the unyielding Empress. Is that what they call me? A hint of sadness colored her question, among other things. And what would you call me, Darian Reed? It was the first time she had used his given name. Before he could answer, the radiation wave hit. The shields flared brilliantly, the yacht shuddering under the strain. For 12 harrowing hours they maintained position, Darian constantly recalibrating the failing systems as the Empress coordinated the evacuation fleet. When the danger finally passed, confirmation came through. All 3 outposts evacuated. Casualties minimal. Exhaustion overtook them both. Somehow, in the quiet aftermath, they found themselves sitting side by side on the observation deck, watching the nebula's beauty now that its fury had subsided. Lyria, he said softly, testing her name without title. She didn't correct him. They called me the Purple Death during the Outer Rim conflicts, she said instead. Before that, the Violet Throne, never just Lyria. Which would you prefer? Her eyes met his, vulnerability and strength intertwined. I've forgotten what it's like to choose for myself. When they returned to the Imperial Palace, something fundamental had changed. As they walked from the landing bay, crews and officials bowed as always, but their eyes followed with new interest when the Empress paused to thank them personally. And there it was, witnessed by a dozen stunned courtiers. The moment Empress Lyria smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face completely. It happened when Darian described an engineering cadet's ingenious solution during the crisis. Chancellor Vexus, watching from the corridor, narrowed his eyes. The human is becoming a problem, he murmured to Minister Calgon. Perhaps, Calgon replied, or perhaps an opportunity. Neither man noticed Neva lingering nearby. Her expression troubled as she hurried away to warn the only person who now made the Empress laugh. A sound that echoed through the palace halls like a long-forgotten melody finally remembered. The Starfall Festival marked the Celestial Dominion's founding 3 centuries earlier. Traditionally, the Empress observed from her elevated platform, distant and untouchable while her subjects celebrated below. This year, however, whispers rippled through the crowd as Empress Lyria descended the ceremonial steps. She's coming down. Has this ever happened before? Look, the human engineer is with her. Darian walked slightly behind Lyria as protocol demanded, but the space between them seemed charged with unspoken connection. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved in ways neither had anticipated. They're staring, Lyria murmured, her composure perfect despite her unprecedented actions. They've never seen their Empress as a person before, Darian replied quietly. Her lips curved into the smile that was becoming less rare. Neither had I. As they moved through the celebration, something remarkable happened. People's initial shock gave way to genuine joy. Children presented traditional starflowers, which Lyria accepted with grace. Elderly veterans bowed with tears in their eyes as she stopped to hear their stories. Chancellor Vexus watched from the shadows, his thin lips pressed into a line of disapproval. Beside him, a hooded figure whispered urgently. Tonight must proceed as planned, Vexus hissed. The Empire cannot be ruled by sentiment. Later, as twilight bathed the capital in lavender hues, Darian and Lyria stood on a private balcony overlooking the festival's final spectacle, a recreation of the cosmic phenomenon that had heralded the Empire's birth. In all my years attending this festival, I've never actually enjoyed it, Lyria admitted. Darian studied her profile, illuminated by the glow of artificial starfall. What's different now? She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the cascading lights. You know what's different. The air between them seemed to still. Months of conversation, of growing understanding, of subtle glances and lingering moments, all crystallized in this single breath. Lyria, he began, her name still feeling like a precious privilege on his lips. A sharp crack interrupted them as the balcony door burst open. 4 masked figures rushed forward with stun weapons raised. Darian reacted instinctively, pulling Lyria behind him as the first blast struck his shoulder. Traitors. Lyria's voice cut through the chaos, her hand already drawing the ceremonial blade at her hip, which proved to be far from merely decorative. The ensuing struggle was brief, but violent. Royal guards, alerted by the commotion, poured in seconds later. When the dust settled, 3 attackers lay subdued. The 4th escaped. You're injured, Lyria said, her composure cracking as she examined the burn on Darian's arm. It's nothing, he insisted, though pain lanced through his shoulder. You placed yourself between me and death, she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaken. Why? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond its simple words. You know why, he answered softly. The royal physician arrived, interrupting the moment, but something had been irrevocably acknowledged between them. Hours later, in the secure medical wing, Darian awakened to find Lyria seated beside his bed, still in her festival attire, her circlet askew. Chancellor Vexus has been detained, she informed him. The assassins were purists, extremists who believe I've corrupted imperial tradition. By walking among your people, or by listening to a human? Both, apparently. Her hand moved hesitantly to rest atop his. They called you my weakness. Darian turned his hand to intertwine their fingers. And what do you call me? My clarity, she whispered. Before you, I saw only the Empire. Now I see the people within it. I see myself. In the dim light of the medical bay, protocol and position momentarily forgotten, the Empress of the Celestial Dominion leaned forward to press her lips gently against those of a human engineer from Earth. Outside the door, Neva smiled to herself before quietly ensuring the corridor remained empty. The Empire was changing. She could feel it in the air itself. The Imperial Senate hadn't convened in full session for 27 years. The massive chamber, with representatives from all 87 worlds of the Celestial Dominion, hummed with anticipation as Empress Lyria took her place at the center. Today marks a new era, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. For too long, the Empire has been governed from above rather than supported from below. That changes now. The reforms she outlined were revolutionary. A council of voices with representatives from every sector, redistribution of resources to developing worlds, open technology exchange, and most shockingly, limitations on imperial power. In the upper gallery, Darian watched with quiet pride. The past 6 months had been tumultuous. Chancellor Vexus's conspiracy had been far-reaching, with sympathizers in every branch of government. The ensuing purge had left gaps that Lyria was now filling with those chosen for merit rather than loyalty. The engineer has seduced her, some traditionalists grumbled. She's abandoned our ways for human sentimentality. But the results were difficult to argue with. Productivity across the Empire had increased by 17%. Rebellious worlds were opening diplomatic channels. For the first time in generations, the Celestial Dominion was expanding through alliance rather than conquest. After the session, Darian waited in the private gardens where exotic flora from 100 worlds bloomed in carefully maintained ecosystems. Lyria arrived still dressed in her formal regalia, though she immediately removed her heavy crown. Well, she asked, a hint of uncertainty in her expression. Did I sound like a radical? You sounded like a leader, he assured her, taking her hands in his. Though Minister Zovak looked like he might faint when you mentioned election cycles. She laughed, the sound no longer rare but still precious. Change is necessary, but perhaps I'm moving too quickly. You're giving them something they've never had before, a voice and a stake in their own governance. Lyria touched his face gently. You've given me something I never had before as well. They had kept their relationship as private as possible, though the court was rife with rumors. The legal complexities were enormous. No imperial sovereign had ever taken a consort from outside the designated noble houses, let alone from an entirely different species. I've been researching Earth customs, Lyria said suddenly. Oh? Your people exchange rings as symbols of commitment. Darian's breath caught. Some do, yes. Would you find such a gesture meaningful? Her characteristic directness remained even in this most personal of moments. Lyria, he said carefully, you know the political implications? She silenced him with a gesture. I am asking what Darian wants, not what the Imperial engineer advises. He smiled, drawing her closer. Darian would be honored beyond words. Then it settled. She produced a small box from within her robes. I had this made. It contains elements from both our worlds. The ring inside was crafted of a silvery metal that seemed to shift colors as it caught the light, inlaid with tiny crystalline structures that mimicked the stars of both their home systems. As he accepted this unprecedented gift, Darian knew they faced challenges still. There would be resistance, perhaps even danger. But the Empire was changing, evolving into something neither of them could have imagined that first day in the throne room. 3 months later, the capital erupted in celebration for a ceremony without precedent. Empress Lyria, resplendent in ceremonial attire that blended traditional imperial design with subtle earth elements, stood before her people with Darian at her side. The celestial dominion has always grown stronger by embracing new worlds, she addressed the crowds. Today we embrace not just diplomatic unions, but personal ones as well. The ancient words of imperial binding were spoken, modified for the first time in 3 centuries to include phrases from Earth traditions. When they were pronounced, joined by both imperial decree and human custom, the cheers that erupted were deafening. In the years that followed, the story became legend, how a human who dared speak truth to power had transformed an empire not through conquest but through conversation. How the unyielding Empress had become simply Lyria to her people, walking among them with light in her eyes and often with laughter on her lips. Throughout the countless worlds of the celestial dominion, children would learn of the love that had changed the course of galactic history. They would hear how an empire built on fear had transformed into one built on understanding, and how sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with armies, but with the simple courage to speak honestly to power. And on quiet evenings, in the private gardens of the imperial palace, the Empress and her human consort would still meet to watch the stars together, discussing governance and philosophy, sharing stories and creating new ones, their voices intertwining like the distant galaxies above, separate yet beautifully perfectly one.